This week's vlog question comes from a marriage conversation that started well and ended a little awkward. A husband writes in to say, somehow my wife and I got on the conversation of whether a married couple should ever have any secrets. We started off wanting to say no, but it seemed like there should be times when one spouse might not tell the other something. But we can never comfortably agree on how to decide when that might be. We didn't get in a fight, but we also left the conversation pretty uncomfortable. Can you help us sort through this issue? Now, let's start by admitting this question rarely comes up at neutral times. I think the writer situation is probably unique. Usually, the context for this question is when one spouse wants more information than the other is willing to give. And so many of you who are listening are wondering whose side am I going to take in this issue? And I think the way that we should get started here is not by taking sides, but by defining some words that often get overlapped and thrown in the same basket. So I want to give us 5 words that I think we could mean when we ask the question, should a couple have any secrets? The first of those is just surprises. This is when we withhold information for a short period of time for the purpose of blessing our spouse. Now, the second category we might use is what we could call secrets proper. That's when we intentionally withhold information about ourselves that would upset our spouse and make us look bad or get us in trouble. So the third area that we might be asking about is confidential information, where we intentionally withhold information from our spouse in order to effectively care for somebody else. A fourth area would be transparency. This is where a couple intentionally makes choices that allows key information in their marriage to be readily accessible to both spouses without requiring a direct request for that information. And the fifth area would be privacy. This is, does one or both spouse have the ability to disclose information voluntarily without having that information extracted by involuntary methods? And I think if we begin to unpack it at that point, we can slow the question down and we can ask it in 5 different ways and say, okay, in each of these areas, surprises, secrets, confidential information, transparency, or privacy, is it good for a couple to have or practice that? So let's go through and let's take a look at it that way. Should a couple have surprises? Yes, if it would be a blessing. If your spouse would enjoy a 40th birthday that was a surprise party with lots of people that they didn't know, then yes, that would be great. If that's going to be something that stresses them out, then no, don't do that. That's not a matter of morality. That is simply a matter of knowing and loving your spouse well. Now, the second question, should a couple have secrets? Should they have information that they know would be offsetting to their spouse, that would upset them, that would make them look bad, where they know they're morally in the wrong and they hide that information just to keep the peace? No, that is a practice of living falsely. It assumes that we're going to be able to protect our spouse from the truth, which is something that never works. And when the truth comes out later, the overall net impact on our marriage negatively is much greater from whatever short term relief we may have gotten from that secret. So, the third question, should a married couple ever have confidential information? And here we might not just mean confidential information like I would have as a counselor, and at times I meet with people and I don't share that information with my spouse, but just in the context of a healthy friendship where people share information that they would not necessarily want other people to know. Might it be good to keep information like that confidential? And in this case, I would say often yes. Now, in the name of having a one flesh relationship, I think that information that is considered confidential should be about one's friend and not about yourself. Now, a caveat here that I would give to folks who frequently find themselves in this situation. My advice is don't ever be taken hostage by agreeing to keep information confidential before you know what it is. So if somebody says to you, can I tell you something, and you promise not to tell anybody else? My advised response to that is, if you trust me enough to ask that question, then what I'm going to ask is that you trust my judgment enough with how I handle that information. And don't place yourself in a situation where you agree to keep it confidential before you know what that information may be. Now, our fourth question would be, should a married couple foster transparency? And again, I think there the answer is probably obvious that yes, transparency is that primary way that we express a one flesh relationship between husband and wife. It includes things like finances, our general schedule, cell phone records, communication with the opposite sex, and social networking passwords. Those kinds of things are the kinds of things that we want to make open, just so we live above reproach and there's not a reason for our spouse to question who we are, what we're doing. A couple that is too busy, too unorganized, or defensive about these kinds of matters probably lacks the kind of healthy transparency that it would allow for a relationship where there's a sense of trust and peace. And so, our final question, should a couple foster privacy? And here again, I think the answer is yes. I think a couple that does a good job with transparency of making those things known that need to be known just so that it's clear that I'm living above reproach and you have no reason to be concerned. Then outside of that, then it should be at my discretion to disclose that information to you. Again, you should be able to come and ask and say, this is something that I want to know, and that information to be given. But that sense of honor that I'm not going to take that information without your knowledge is part of that sense of trust that should be there within a healthy relationship. Now below this video, I include several resources that if you say this is hard for us for one reason or another, whether it be communication or finances or decision making or just the different ways that we approach different issues within our marriage, that would allow you and your spouse to talk through these matters in greater depth in some of those areas. But I hope that this information has been helpful, and I look forward to answering more questions. Thank you.